Zeenat and we're here to talk about Let's Talk Clarity, the podcast where we open up honest and empowering conversations about mental health and well-being. I'm going to be your host, and today's episode is truly a special one. We'll be diving into about the power of nature and well-being and why spending time outdoors can be and have such a profound impact on our mental and our emotional health. Now today joining is Vanessa Potter, the co-founder of ParkBathe, a brilliant initiative she has that helps people connect with nature through guided walks in Bromley and Croydon. Without further ado, I'm just going to get Vanessa on stage here with me. Hello, Vanessa. I'm just doing your introduction. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
As we know, Vanessa is not only passionate about nature, but has also been involved in some incredible projects, such as the Dementia Project with MHA, which she's going to tell us all about, which is about exploring nature, the Refugee Project with Care for Calais, women's retreats using forest bathing techniques, and we'll be talking about the science behind nature's connection. So lots to cover today, and I'm really excited to get started to chat with you, Vanessa. So welcome to Let's Talk Clarity. It's really great to have you here. Let's dive straight into a little bit about you. Vanessa, why not tell us a little bit about who you are and a bit about ParkBathe and how it all started?
Okay. It actually started in 2021, post-COVID, if we can remember those times. Everyone was coming out of lockdown. I had a conversation with a health researcher from Derby University, a lady called Dr. Kirsten McEwen. And very quickly we realized we were very aligned. My background is contemplative practice and research. I've had collaborations with Cambridge University going back, 12 years now, doing lots of meditation projects where we're looking at human experience. And she is a forest bathing researcher and a forest bathing guide. And basically we put our heads together and we came up with this idea of taking forest bathing, which is a Japanese health prescription called Shinrin-yoku, which is very widespread throughout Japan. 5 million people a year use it, but it doesn't really translate to a Western audience, and certainly not to a British audience, because it requires going and wandering around an ancient woodland, which a lot of people just would not do. Even if they felt stressed, it's not necessarily an intuitive response. So we took all the good stuff from the forest bathing research and how that program works in Japan, and we condensed it into a 1 hour, very accessible, so no spirituality in this at all, very down-to-earth, secular, how-to, if you like, approach to forest bathing, and we put it into urban parks. Now, our question, we did a citizen science study and we published a peer-reviewed paper. Our question was, would that work? You know, parks are noisy, busy, there's some woodland maybe, but there's limited greenery in comparison to, you know, Japanese with their ancient woodlands. Would we be able to get some idea of well-being? Would people feel more relaxed? So we did the study, and the quick answer is yes, people found it enormously relaxing. We actually had some really positive results. Overall, we saw a 40% reduction in anxiety. Now, that's not just one walk. That was multiple walks over and over, repeated over a 3-month period. The big score, though, was a 50% reduction in rumination. And our model, and it's exactly the same in every single park now, we've rolled it out through a community base. Lots of volunteers are leading these sessions. It's exactly the same thing in every park. And this is what is working. So it's very easy to come along to a session. It's a slow, silent stroll. That's what forest bathing is. There's no water involved. You are getting into your senses and out of your head. It's an hour in which to really come into your body and feel probably more relaxed than you've felt in as long as you can remember. And now we've taken nearly 1,000 people, and I have that repeated to me so many times, I cannot tell you. It's a deeply reflective but deeply relaxing experience, and these sessions happen now every single week in parks, from Crystal Palace to Cater Park, Stanmore Wood, so all the way throughout Croydon and Bromley.
Wow, amazing. it's, do you know what? I can just feel my energy levels just kind of going, ooh, just by listening to you talk, because I know we've spoken before on many, on an occasion when we first connected, and what you do is incredibly inspiring and is so important. When we talk about an hour of your time, an hour is not a long time, is it? To literally focus on yourself, dedicate that time for you, where you disconnect from everything. And talking about disconnecting, when do they actually leave their phones? Is that part of your?
Yeah, absolutely. So some people come for, I mean, I could talk about it for hours. There's so many different reasons why people come. Some people come because they've been socially isolated. They've found disconnection from people. And so they come to be with other people, but not having to talk. Some people come for a digital detox, a reason to not be on a screen. And yes, we are absolutely, it's a phone-free hour. We have very few housekeeping rules, but that is one of them. People refer themselves, people refer other people. The project originally was appealing to skeptics, actually. So people who wouldn't normally do something like this, who would think, oh, forest bathing, this is some woo-woo crazy stuff. So that was very much our target audience. And that continues to be the case. We often get people turning up, standing there going, I don't quite know why I'm here. Someone sent me a flyer and something on social media and said, you need to come here. And here I am. And they're often quite defensive. We had it very recently. A guy was like, my wife's brought me here. I don't know why I'm here. And then, of course, those people, we really enjoy having them along. Everybody's welcome, of course, but particularly people who are skeptic, because it's the baselines. You come with low expectations, your response probably is going to be up here.
You've opened this door up to them that they never imagined.
Well, this gentleman, halfway through the session, we have little moments where we will stop. If people want to share something they've seen, often it was a beautiful red berry. I can't tell you how many people have shown me red berries. I love it every time. But there'll be something, a little leaf, a little beetle on a tree bark, just something they saw, which was utterly delightful. And this gentleman, we were about to move on, and he just said, oh, no. I've got to say it. He says, I have noticed more in the last 30 minutes than I have in 20 years coming to this park and running around it. And I have to say, I'm so surprised, but I'm just full of joy. And it was a wonderful moment, because he was so skeptic to begin with. I mean, he was quite humorous about it, but it rippled around the group, and it was a very large group that day. And it's often a sense of coming together, even though we don't talk. There's a real sense of community, doing something meaningful that's going to leave you with a lasting impact. Our surveys have shown recently that the ripple effect lasts for anything from 1 day to sometimes for 2 weeks. So that connection to nature, that deep slowing down, reflection.
We don't do.
It doesn't just sort you out for that evening. It ripples throughout the rest of your week sometimes.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you've said the word slowing down, and I think that's so fundamental. I was talking to a friend of mine who went on this long walk somewhere with a friend and her 2 dogs, but they actually, when you're dog walking, it can be quite frantic, can't it? And you're kind of trying to chase your dog and checking where they are and all of that. But she was able to kind of just disconnect, let the dog do its thing out there. And she said she started walking really slowly, and suddenly she spotted things that she'd never spotted before. There was a different sensation within her internally. But initially, I mean, she found it quite difficult to actually take those slow steps. And, I've been on mindful walks and talks and done this kind of slow pace walking, and it does take a while. And you're right, you kind of have to go a few times before you actually can make a shift and difference. But in that moment, there is something quite special, isn't there?
Yeah, the slowing down, for some people at the end, just the slowing down was like the like absolute mind-blowing element. Some people don't get past their feet, because we do lots of different body exercises. I've had that a number of times, and that's their takeaway. And it's very individual for people. But the slowing down takes a while. It's about 25 minutes in. And we, as people who are guiding and the volunteers who are part of the support network, we see it. We see a physiological shift in people. Their faces open, their shoulders drop. It's very small cues, but it's very visible. We absolutely notice it. And there's a sort of there's a little, we always talk about it, there's a voice in your head saying, oh, I've got so many better things than I really can't be doing this. This is ridiculous. And I always promise people, and I know I can do this, we've done it so many times, I can absolutely wholeheartedly say it will calm. But that there's often a fight. But that's why people come back, because it's quite an addictive feeling to feel good, to feel that relaxed. And often we'll get reflections like, I remember a lady once said, we often get this face at the end, which is just absolutely like everything's slow, and they're yawning, which is a really good sign because they're in their parasympathetic. And she says, I sit on the sofa. I'm just thinking, I sit on the sofa watching Netflix at night, thinking I'm relaxing. That's not relaxing. I'm still up here. This is what relaxing feels like. And so for her calibration of what it felt like to be relaxed was completely thrown apart. It was blown away. And so she has a new,
what you say, that you ask people, what do they do to relax? And like you're saying, what is truly relaxing? So for her, in her mind, watching Netflix and TV was relaxing then, but she's experienced something new now, which is actually the true essence.
Well, she's one of our walk leaders.
There you go.
It does become addictive. People do this. They come on a session and then they ask to volunteer, and they come along and they help. And this is why the project's such a lovely, it has a big beating heart. It's a lovely community project. It's sustained entirely by volunteers and by people helping to run it, which is what's so nice.
You have the change in mood, which you're talking about. There's also the work on the memory aspect. So, and the engagement around, having this initiative. Now, talking about memory, dementia, how does this support people with dementia?
Incredibly well, actually. We got some funding and we trained up walk leaders at MHA The Wilderness, which is a little private garden. It's a little sort of separate garden next to a care home in Shirley. And this is a beautiful space. Anyone can actually go. It's an open garden. It was funded by the National Lottery, and they have a Wellbeing hub there as well. And so they now run sessions every Monday at 11 o'clock, and anybody can just turn up. The team are always there and waiting. And if you are in a wheelchair, the paths are wheelchair accessible. If you are experiencing dementia symptoms, you are also welcome, and you come with family and carers. And these sessions are shortened a little bit, sort of more closer to 50 to 30 minutes long, depending on our group. And we use lots more sensory tools to connect people. So, for example, if you've got sensory loss, I'm thinking of a gentleman that comes quite regularly. He's in a wheelchair and he struggles to see. And so we use little mirrors for him. And I remember very clearly, we showed him the sky in a mirror, and he was so delighted because, as he said, we just brought the sky to him. So we connect people to nature in quite clever, creative ways. And what that does is it opens up conversation, reminiscence. It often, the walks are traditionally silent, but on the dementia sessions, they're a little bit more chatty, and that's very welcome. It's the same with our refugee sessions, because language then becomes something more meaningful. So for a dementia patient who is perhaps nonverbal, or maybe one or two words, if they say 3 or 4 words together in a sentence, that's so lovely for their family, and it connects people. So the dementia sessions are a privilege to be part of. They're very humbling. They're utterly beautiful. I did a session a few months ago, and one of the ladies at the end just stood and recited a poem. She was so inspired. And we found that it helps with focus and concentration. Some dementia patients struggle. They might wander off. They actually feel engaged because we're collectively doing something, but it's quite fun. It's quite playful. So loads of reasons why it's a lovely, nurturing, connecting, nostalgic experience for that community.
So continuing with this, what are some of the ways caregivers themselves can introduce nature-based activities to support their loved ones with dementia? What
Come
can
on a
they
session.
actually do?
Come on a session and see what we
Come to
do.
your session. That's
It's
it.
absolutely the easiest way. And this is, and one of the things that we say at the end of every session is, look, go and share this. Go and teach the people in your family this. And I have actually come across 4 different times over the last few years. I found people park bathing in parks, and they jump a mile when they see me. But then I'm delighted because I'm like, that's the point.
That's
Share
what you
it.
want.
Yeah,
Can
but
I
you,
share something that's really funny though? When I first spoke to you, you talked about park bathing. I thought it was actual bathing in the
yeah,
park, and I
I
was a
know.
bit like, till I actually spoke to you and
Mm.
understood better what that was. This was
Yeah.
some time back, but it was
It's an
really
eternal
interesting.
problem. It's an eternal problem with the water. It's the translation, because basically Shinrin Yoku means absorbing the woodland atmosphere, and that's been translated into bathing in the atmosphere. So that's where it's come about. But yes, I know. But yeah, the best thing to do is to come on a session and you know, you see the exercises. Because what we found a lot is that people don't know how to be in nature. And for some people, that will sound like a crazy statement, but there'll be lots of people who kind of think, do you know what? If I'm walking around the park, I don't know what to do. How do I engage myself or my kids? And so by giving simple prompts, you have things to do and you have somewhere to start. And our podcast is full of resources and tips and lots of different ways that you
Lovely.
can connect to nature.
So what's your because you said something that's really interesting when you said people don't often know what to do when they're in the woodlands or the forest, and you know, they said, oh, I went out to the park and I went in the woodlands and I was in nature and I disconnected. But then you've got the people that go in and they're going through nature but they're still on their phones. Is that touching and grounding with nature?
Well, no. But what I would, I mean, I wouldn't blame anybody. If somebody actually gets outdoors and goes into a park, even if they're going with headphones, well done, take the win. You've got natural light that's going to help your circadian rhythms. If you go and do that in the morning, it'll probably help you sleep that evening. There's lots of health benefits for being outdoors in nature. The gentle exercise of walking, there's plenty just from that. You can build on that. So I would never say to someone, you're doing that wrong. But what we could do is look at some other ways to slow you down and help you notice something that you would otherwise miss, because that is where the kind of joy comes in. And it's this weird word. We don't use the word joy very much in common language.
No.
But it is a word that we hear at the end of a ParkBathe session, and people are almost surprised as they say it. They say things like, you know, yeah, I feel relaxed and calm, but they're like, I just feel joyful. And it's such a nice feeling. You don't get that walking around with headphones. You get that by unplugging and slowing. But hey, if you're in the park, this is a good thing.
Yeah, so it's stepping out, and so it's a starting point, as we say. Right, it's going to bring me on to the Refugee Project for that you've been part of for Care for Calais. So you've also worked with them. What role does nature play in their healing and resilience?
So this, again, was a funded project. We've trained up a volunteer from Care for Calais in the local area. And for the refugees, gosh, these are really poignant sessions. A lot of the refugees spend most of their days in a hotel. They're not allowed to work. They can't earn money. They can't really do anything. And so we take them outside. They're often very, very stressed. And they're quite suspicious sometimes, or maybe not suspicious, but wary. They're possibly had really traumatic experiences, and they carry a lot of that with them and in their bodies. So our main aim is to relax and to make them feel connected and welcome. And we do this in a particular woodland that's utterly beautiful. And actually, it doesn't take very long for this community to start to open up. And what we found they benefit from the most is feeling like they belong somewhere. A lot of the refugees, even with limited language, can articulate that this is something that connects them to their home, something that reminds them. They'll be interested in what leaves and what trees we've got, how that correlates, what comparisons there are. It brings back nostalgia and memory. They feel utterly grateful. Gratitude is a huge emotion that comes into these sessions. They can often be quite tearful. A lot of our sessions evoke high emotions, well, not high emotions, but emotions that can sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable almost, because you're actually feeling how you feel. And also with the refugees, we encourage language. Again, we would normally be slow and silent, but they are interested in nature-based language. So caterpillar, bark, leaf.
Oh, yes.
And it's this wonderful, and their language is normally very bureaucratic because they're filling in forms, and it's all very functional language. It's not delightful, beautiful language. And
Yeah,
so
that they can connect with.
learning the word caterpillar, honestly, it's such a pleasure. So we use nature printmaking. We make our names out of sticks. We do all sorts of little creative things with the refugees because we don't have language. We communicate through lots of different means, and these sessions are very deeply nurturing. All our volunteers that help on them are always very deeply moved, and we'd love to do more with the refugee community, but it's quite a hard community to access, but I'd love to do more.
Lovely. Do you know what? I think that is something that is so fundamental for refugees. I mean, to give them that sense of calm, feeling that they can relate to something that they've left at home is very, very important. And just being able to be grounded, because as we know, they go through a lot of experienced trauma as well. I lost you there for a second. I wasn't sure how much of that was there, but you're still here. So just going back, actually, I wanted to ask you, completely forgot, your demographics. What are your demographics that come along to your ParkBathe sessions?
Well, it really varies. So we have mostly mixed adult sessions. We do, when we have funding, run family sessions, and that obviously gets a wider age group. For our study, we did do adolescents, so we did from 8 to 17-year-olds. We have predominantly women that come, but we're doing quite well. We have quite mixed backgrounds. We're managing to reach other communities, and what we find is that if someone comes from a global majority community, they'll come and go, this is fab. My community isn't into this. I'm going to go back and talk to them about it. And we're really keen, because what ParkBathe is meant to be is a resource that we can give to a community so they can own it. So, for example, I'm talking to the Muslim community at the moment, very, very keen. And they would interpret ParkBathe in a slightly different way. Well, our walk is secular, theirs doesn't need to be secular. And so the idea is that we're going to be applying for funding and training up this Muslim community so they can then take this resource and use it and amplify it. And so it's good demographics, I would say, at the moment, but we could always reach more groups. We do a women's only session. That's always extremely popular. That's always very full. Lots of women are scared about being in green spaces alone for multiple reasons. That could be cultural, that could also be safety.
That you put out on LinkedIn, that was really interesting, that post that you put out with a lot of traction about how uncomfortable women feel maybe going out into the forest, especially at certain times of the day, certain times of the year, i.e. winter time.
And also, if you've got anxiety, getting outside is so extraordinarily hard. And we very much champion, if somebody comes and they're really, really super anxious, they don't need to say anything other than their name. And so we're very gentle. We really try to hold a very compassionate space for people who come, who are struggling, because that's why we're there. And also, most of our walk leaders have come at a time when they've been struggling, so they've got the T-shirt. They know exactly what that's like, and we know what people need. And it's a very gentle touch. So, we try to be as open to every community. There isn't anybody that couldn't come, basically, because it's open to most mobilities. And as I say, most adults could come to it. I think the oldest we've ever had was, I think it was a lady who was about 85.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, so we're pretty much everybody, and wheelchair. Some of the parks are wheelchair friendly as well. So
talking about the demographics, obviously I work a lot with children and young people, so my passion is around them, trying to get them out into nature as much as possible, because we know how a lot of them are indoors, they're on their digital devices, they're also not as active as they were maybe 10-15 years ago. I mean, in terms of what differences have you noticed with the children and young people that have come along? Just sort of giving us some feedback on that.
Well, I would say that actually it really varies, the age category actually that you're talking to. The 8 to 12-year-olds have a natural understanding of nature. When we have children's groups, do quite specific exercises with them. And actually, there's a really good interview, a whole section on children on the podcast, where we've got lots of interviews with children in nature. And the things that they say shows their deep understanding. And actually, research shows if you can get a child up to the age of 8 out into nature regularly and have it as part of their life and totally normalize, that relationship will be sustaining. It will stay for their whole life. If they don't, they can get it back, but it tends to be harder. Children who are in their teen years tend to have a natural disconnect because peer relationships are more important. So connecting with peers in nature is a really clever way of getting them in there. We found when we worked with the older teenagers who've got exam pressures, school, A-levels, they realized that actually this was a resource. And they hadn't thought of it like that. They'd never thought of it actually as something that would help them with their exams and and keeping that kind of stress at a manageable level, but also as a way to de-escalate and a way to kind of come back down after that sort of cortisol high of, coming up to mock exams, for example. And a couple of them were quite surprised and commented about how actually, and we would say, look, you don't have to come for a whole hour. You can just come for a little 15 minutes. Just come for a little break. Slowly,
Dip your toes into it.
Yeah, come and meet your friends here. And so they weren't against that. A lot of it's about education and about planting ideas, and then letting kids figure it out for themselves. The last thing teenagers want is some annoying adult telling them what to do.
No. As adults, we don't like to be told what to do as well. So. It's said in itself, but yeah, no, wonderful. Right, let's talk about the women's retreat. I know we've touched base a little bit on that, but I'd like to know more about it. Explain what the forest bathing retreat is, how it benefits them specifically. I know we've talked about the general mental health and well-being around it, but very specific to them, and how it stands out from other retreats that women may go to.
Yeah. So
spas.
Absolutely. So the ParkBathe project is a free community-led project. That is something that anyone can go to for free at any time. The full day retreats are a paid-for option. They're a much deeper dive because they come with a 2.5-hour workshop first. So this is a series of workshops. This is basically encompassing the 12, 15 years of research that I've done. It's basically everything I know put into these workshops. And they're a series. They start with a stress awareness and a stress management workshop, which comes at it from quite a different angle. I actually remember going on a stress workshop years ago and coming away feeling so stressed because I'm going to die, all the terrible things. And so I really don't teach about stress management. I use something called micro practices. People leave with so much information and management tools, ways to actually do this, but also a lot about cognitive reframing. So I use a lot of research. So it's a pretty immersive, fun, engaging, interactive workshop. There's no sitting quietly. Everybody gets involved. And then we have lunch. And then the afternoon is, I kind of call it's a hybrid between forest bathing and rewilding. It's very specific to women. There's all sorts of other little fun things in there. And women tend to they quite often float away with pages of notes and really inspired, enthused. We're very connected. It's only a small group. So the stress is the first one. The second one is resilience building. Again, it's kind of that word. No one really knows what it is. So a lot of the research, what it actually means. I talk about the nervous system a lot. If we understand our neurobiology, we understand why things happen. And that actually can lead to us being a lot more forgiving towards ourselves. So the resilience one also has another rewilding and forest bathing session afterwards. So they're basically full days. These are pretty meaty sessions. And then the third one is really lovely. It's on compassion. Again, a word that most people have very sort of wishy-washy understanding. It's often seen as a bit of a what? Oh my gosh, this is such a deep dive. And people tend to be astounded actually what compassion is, what the research shows. I take a very pragmatic view of compassion. I will look at it from the spiritual angle, but the spiritual angle and the scientific angle are the same, only in the intention, the core, the root of it. So the research is very wide reaching and is very compelling. And so again, I teach a program of what compassion is, what it actually, I teach a lot of what it's not. That's often the easiest way to understand it. And lots of practical tools. I actually teach some cognitive reframing tools. And again, another forest bathing session. So these are kind of like a series of 3. What I find is someone comes to the first and then they just go and book all the others, because you leave with like a massive dose of self-awareness and a massive dose of how to view the world through different eyes, through a different perspective. And then I think if someone came to one of my workshops and they went away and they thought that was nice for a couple of days, and then that was that, then I have failed. And what I find months and months later is that the little things, because I talk about very small, really small things that they've implanted and they've built and they've grown and they create this foundation. And so that's very much what I am about. And I do talk to past participants, and they're still doing it, and in fact telling other people. And
I think that's key, isn't it, with what you do? That's absolutely key. You know, and you've said the word is the foundation. Often people are looking for quick fixes, and it's just the icing on the top of the cake, or someone says, I'll just do this tool, but actually you're giving somebody a tool, but do they understand what that tool is actually for, and is it the right tool for them? Because you can go out, you could read all these self-help books, but actually unless you get to the foundation of it and the pure understanding, it's not really going to.
And it's actually beyond the understanding, actually, and particularly with something like compassion. If you treat that cognitively, like I can intellectually pass this information over to you, but that won't change your life one bit. You'll just know more. You actually have to feel it, which means you actually have to be a bit uncomfortable. So there are some moments in all of these workshops where there's a little bit of discomfort, and I kind of try and reframe discomfort as like, yay, we're getting to the good stuff. Like, yay, this is good. And it's really interesting when I do this with corporate environments, because these workshops.
That's going to be hilarious.
Yeah, but it's actually incredibly empowering. It really connects people. It's an incredibly great way to consolidate a team, to actually feel, rather than just feel like, satellites at work bouncing off each other. You're actually cohesive. You're actually human beings. You've all got a nervous system. Let's just learn a little bit about what nervous systems do, why they respond the way they do. And, a little just understanding what even co-regulation is. And these things are incredibly useful within the workplace. And again, anecdotally, I've had a lot of feedback that it's really changed. Not changed with a capital C, but lots of little tweaks and shifts that have actually rippled. And I like the word ripple. I think that's probably the best way to describe all the work I do. We're talking about little ripples. And so in the corporate world, these are very impactful. The problem is getting leadership and management to see the benefit, and they just look at productivity quite often, not always, and tick boxes. But actually, if you did want to invest, then actually the rewards are definitely there. It's so worth it.
And you know what, you've hit the nail right on the head. Leadership need to also get involved in it. It's not just for the employees. Tick box, that word tick box just gives me shivers up my spine. It just like, in our teaching profession, it was like that. But I think the more we can get people at the top, the CEOs, the leaderships taking part in this, that's where the true changes and transformations will really, really happen, isn't it?
I totally agree. And actually, the last set of workshops I did, which was for a very large national charity, they were lobbying for their leadership team to come. Fantastic. Because actually some of them had an odd email going, do you have the time to do this? And it was like, oh my gosh. And so they're like, please, what can we do to get them to come, even to they come to the first session? And I think this is a really key point about, because a lot of companies will invest in things like how to present work, or being, or leadership skills, specific skills to the role that people are in. Whereas we don't really understand that learning about interoception and how we communicate as human beings is like all part of that. Our self-awareness is, it's how we do our jobs. And so how can you not think that that's interrelated in your ability to do your job? And it's just getting the it's just getting that across. But yeah, experiential, I'm afraid, putting your toe in the water, being in the room is required.
Brilliant. So before we move on to the science behind the nature, because I know we've touched base a little bit on that, but I want to kind of delve into that a little bit more. But if someone wants to bring forest bathing into their daily life, just now, what are some simple practices they can start with? So if you were going to tell someone right now, this is what you need to start with, what would they be?
Oh, I mean, go to a green space. The first thing I would actually say is
come to my retreat.
Well, yeah, come to ParkBathe. ParkBathe is the easiest way to learn this. The easiest thing to do, I think, because people get a bit panicky about, oh, what, I'm going to do it wrong. What shall I do? And that's why actually the guided aspect is so important. And again, anecdotally, we hear this, oh my gosh, time and time again. Because people don't like to think, because I can tell you, guiding yourself is hard, because what are you doing? There's a cognitive requirement for you to be in your head to think about what exercise am I going to do? Am I going to do it right? You're instantly in your head. So that's why having someone just say to you, notice this. You're like, oh, and we get this. People are so relieved that they don't have to think. But if you were to go to a park and to try and just get a flavor, I would say go off the path. Don't walk the route that you walk all the time, and walk one stride per second. If you just go off the path and just feel your feet and what the surfaces are beneath your feet, nothing more. Don't give yourself a to-do list, because otherwise we'll just turn this into another job. Just walk slowly off the path. That would be enough just to get you going. And it sounds so ridiculously simple, but actually if you try it, it's surprising.
Do you know what, I went on a walk with Nut Hatch Retreat, who you know, and my very first experience with them, because I was in a place where I was so inside my head, there was a lot going on, and I was, you know, very, very stressed. Went on this and I was like, no, I'm taking myself, I've been saying for months that I'm going to go. I went along, and it was just sort of the last spur of the moment, and it took me a while, and this might, it took me a while to ground myself, disconnect, let the things kind of flow out my head. But by the end of, I think we must have been there an hour and a half actually, and we were stood on a bridge, and there was water rippling through and everything, and I was just staring out, and in that moment it just hit me, and everything just went, and I burst into tears. But that moment was the best moment that I've had in a long time. The sense of calm, the sense of joy and peace, and oh my God, you know, why have I not been doing this? Why have I been doing X, Y, and Z in my life for so long that's not been serving me? So that's just a short snippet of my experience, but I 101% agree that, you know, doing something like this as a daily routine, not every day. If you can do it every day, great. But
well, do it every day, and you don't need to do an hour and a half. I mean, you can see why people constantly ask to volunteer for our project, because they see people have the reaction that you had, and that's actually infectious. So that, you know, just going into the bit of the science, that's co-regulating everybody around you. You know, we all will feel that and respond to that in a very human way. And so it's quite addictive. You kind of want to be doing this more, and actually you can do it every day, but doing an hour isn't sustainable necessarily for everybody. But 10 minutes is, and you can do it anywhere you're walking. You walk slower to the bus stop. Next to the bus stop, notice the tree. You know, get to know the tree every day. What's different? You know, just I've had a wonderful email. Yes, exactly. A lady who had been watching a tree in the estate where she lives, and before she'd done ParkBathe, she'd lived there for 15 years, and she's like, oh my gosh, we've got a massive oak tree, never seen it. Now I'm like, I've given him a name. I go see him. I leave him little gifts. He gives me gifts. And there's this whole relationship purely because she learned to notice. And that transformed her relationship with a place that actually she wasn't very happy in. And it has huge influence on our life.
Yeah, absolutely does. I mean, I don't know if you saw a recent post I put out of some trees that I noticed. So I'm here in Dubai at the moment while we're recording this. And I'd gone to a networking event for International Women's Day, and it's in the downtown, and it's all, you know, cars and pollution and all of that. Then all of a sudden, as I was walking to the metro, I spotted from the corner of my eye these trees intertwining roots, totally incredible. And I was like, I have to go take a picture. Dropped everything, took a photograph, and there I was. I had to post it. But even now, I'll look at it and I'll just think, the way that tree has bends and curves, and it was kind of reflecting on my life, and then the resilience and how you don't have to go on a straight path. It's okay to kind of see. But the main thing I'm trying to say is that I noticed, because I opened up my eye and I went for it. I didn't think, oh, look, I'm in a rush, I need to get back home. Or I stopped, and then I immersed myself in it. And I think that's so important, isn't it? That we have to start looking around us more.
Yeah, and it's finding the tools to do that. It's not finding the time. It's finding the tools on how to do that. I mean, absolutely, this is my mantra in everything I do.
Right, let's dive into the science-based nature connection that we have. So there is growing scientific research on the benefits of nature. You do a lot of it, but what are some of the most compelling findings that you've come across?
I mean, there's so much. So the interesting thing about forest bathing, just as a little note about the research, the Japanese particularly started researching forest bathing after they'd implemented it in Japan, which is quite funny because normally we would research something to death before we'll even consider it in this country. So retrospectively, what they have found is cortisol levels lower. Cortisol is our stress hormone, and I should just say it's a really essential hormone. We shouldn't see this as a bad thing. You need a cortisol spike in the morning to get out of bed. That's why looking at sunlight in the morning is a really good thing. It gives you that cortisol spike, but we don't want it flooding our body extensively. We don't want it all day long. We don't want that little cortisol button being pressed. And with our modern, busy, frenetic lives, we often have our fingers stuck on it. And so being in nature reduces cortisol levels. There's a couple of researchers, Quinley and Miyazaki, are two big, well-known, I kind of call them the granddaddies of forest bathing in terms of research. They've done a lot of research on this. So stress is definitely impacted. Our study saw reductions in anxiety and rumination. But the other area that's really interesting is immune health. And this is something that comes from the airborne chemicals, the volatile chemicals that we breathe in when we're outdoors. Now, there's more research on this in Japan with the hinoki cypress trees and the natural flora in Japan. But what they found is that this has a direct impact on our what's called NK cells, our natural killer cells. And these are the cells that will, eat away and attack cancers or pathogens that are in the body. Now, what it doesn't do is cure you. That's really important to say when we're talking about immune health. But it gives you immune resistance. It gives you an immune boost. And in fact, if you can spend up to 2 hours, accrue 2 hours a week in those little 10-minute blocks, maybe 20 minutes, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. If you can get 2 hours by the end of the week of being outdoors, ideally in a natural space, even just in a little recreation ground or a garden or a local park, then you will get an immune boost that will last up to a month. So this is with our modern life, this is a really good thing. So, and also you will get mood boosting impact as well. So mood is impacted. The other thing that's impacting is our attention. There's a lot of studies and interesting work on how being in nature is a very soft and gentle environment. If you think about your house and working environments, they're all straight lines, and it's quite a for our visual system, which is intricately linked to our nervous system. That's very stressful, and that is constantly pushing us to work very hard. Requires a lot of our direct attention, and when we go into nature, that all relaxes. And so, if you think of yourself of having a sort of an attention bucket, it gets emptied by being indoors, inside looking at computers and straight lines and that intense work that we do. We go into nature and it naturally refills. So there's all sorts, I mean, there's so much. And some of the research that they did, the Japanese, really interesting research, like they locked people in hotel rooms and pumped hinoki oils into the room to test whether people were less stressed. I mean, I love the stuff they did. I mean, of course, they did it all ethically and all the rest of it. But it's just quite amusing that some of the stuff that they've done is really, really interesting in terms of.
Well, it seems to be one of the blue zone areas as well, isn't it? For
Japan, yeah, it's parts of Japan.
Have you been to Japan yourself?
No, I'd love to go.
No, well, yeah, me too. I would love to. Yeah, it's just incredible. So what I wanted to ask you as well, in terms of for those who are struggling to get outside, so for perhaps, the weather's constantly bad, there's this busy city life and all of that, just what's your one sort of piece of advice or what they can incorporate to try and get them to do that and just experience it, just to step out? Because living in England, we know as soon as we see the weather, we go, oh, I'm staying in, it's too cold or it's too miserable. Even those who enjoy the outside.
We have seen record numbers at ParkBathe over winter this year. We normally tick over at about a 60% attendance level, which apparently is very high for a free event. Over winter, we saw 80 to 100% attendance. Now, wow. I think this is really interesting. I think this is because the project's established. So people, when it is grim and grey and dull and there's no inspiration, there's no light.
Hail and storm.
But they come to find it. And so I think that's part of it. It's like, I know when I come here, I will see something and that will bring color back into my life. Even if it's like a sort of dull brown leaf, it'll have a little spot of yellow somewhere, or it'll have a bit of green still on the outside, or there'll be a bright berry that I'll spot. And it's like, it fills me again. It's like I get my color cup, my color palette comes back.
Oh, I like that.
So I think sometimes those are actually the days you have to go outside to find the color. If you can't, and there's lots of reasons why people can't, you can actually look out a window. You could go and spend 3 minutes. You could even spend 1 minute just looking out of a window, doing slow breathing, and just look at a tree, watch it moving. You could just look into, if you've got a green space that you can actually see, just go and see what you can spot. You might see someone walking a dog. You might, just looking out of a window, we know from research. In fact, just looking at the color green, believe it or not, has a physiological impact on our bodies. So, there are ways you can do it. If you can get outside and just stand in a garden or in a green space just for 5 minutes, you will give yourself a physiological reset. Not as much as a full immersion, but you'll get, again, we're taught tiny little things. And it's like, you get the win. If you do that, you take the win. I did it. And you're more likely to then do it again.
Yeah, you're drip feeding your body with what it needs slowly and surely.
And rewarding yourself. We are so harsh on ourselves.
I know.
Reward yourself when you do it. If you're inspired and you go and book a walk and you go, that's a huge win for some people. For some people, that's massive. And some people, they have to book 5 or 6 times before they come. And when they finally come, we're like, this is brilliant. And of course, then they're likely to come again.
Wow. Well, it's, you know what, Vanessa, this has been such an insightful conversation. I love listening to what you do for people and, the joy, I'm going to use that word, the joy it brings, because it is absolutely needed. And if people haven't experienced it. Like myself, I've been trying to get to you, and I will this time. That's my 2025 goal for this year, is to get down and experience one of your ParkBathes, because I can't be sitting here interviewing you and not have experienced it myself. So when I return from Dubai, that's the first thing I'm going to be doing.
Come do it, and you'll get the lovely spring colour.
Absolutely, I'm looking forward to that. So before we wrap up, where can people find out more about ParkBathe and all the amazing work that you do?
Well, ParkBathe is quite easy to find. We're all over social media. We have a Linktree site, which is just basically Linktree and then /ParkBathe, and all the walks are free to book. You can just go and Google and find us on Eventbrite. So if you put ParkBathe in, we're going to pop up the Facebook page, the X account, whatever or Instagram, you'll find us. For me, I am vanessapotter.com, super easy. And actually, there are also links on vanessapotter.com to get to ParkBathe as well. So that's got all the corporate work that I do with the retreats. I do events, either the full series, or I can just do singular events. I can actually come and guide a forest bathing session in a local park for your colleagues in a part that none of you have ever set foot in. So and I've done that before. That's a real eye opener.
There you
go. So you can find me, and I've got another retreat coming up. There's one on Sunday that's sold out, but the one on May the 11th has spaces left, and that's for the stress awareness one. So any women that are interested can come along to that.
Lovely. Excellent. So any final thoughts or advice for our listeners who are looking to reconnect with nature and improve their well-being? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, when we launched our project, we did a challenge because we were appealing to skeptics, and we came through the science door. And so quite often I find challengers come along and challenge us. Don't come believing anything. Come along to a session with no expectations, and you can stand with your hands on your hips and go, this is rubbish. Just come, and let's see what happens.
Love it. I love a challenge. Well, I'm coming, so but it's not because I'm a skeptic, because I know it works. So I'm coming along because I really want to immerse myself in what ParkBathe and what you stand for and what you do. That's the reason, and I know the beauty of it. So yes. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to Let's Talk Clarity and share it with someone who you know that could benefit from these insights. And coming up in our next episode, we'll be discussing the challenges of stress in children and young people. So stay tuned for more honest conversations for better mental well-being. Remember, clarity creates confidence. See you next time.